the right to publish. You didn't buy the artwork. If you bought the artwork, you put it up on a wall. But then you can't publish it. Or
decide one or the other.
And when you put it up on the wall, you pay sales tax. Did you pay any sales tax? No? So you're holding it illegally. Not so good. I mean,
how you said?
Suppose
how many characters? Is your famous question. How many characters do you know that were created by publishers? I mean,
none. Zip. So that whole argument, that whole debate, that whole thing, it was really for all the field, because there's been this problem with illustrators. I mean, publishers would keep Norman Rockwell's paintings. Norman Rockwell, really? Line their halls with Norman Rockwell paintings. They don't own them. It's stupid. And because Norman Rockwell or all these artists were so nice and stupid, they let it happen. And yet, the future, and this really comes relative to the future, if you realize that in time these things will become popular and people will buy them and sell them, and they just like they did in the past, then giving them away doesn't make any sense at all. It's idiotic. And that's what they're doing, giving them away. You don't mind if I put this on the wall, do you, Norman? Oh, no, go right ahead. Excuse me? Let's stop this conversation. Rewind. You don't mind if I put this on the wall? Yes, I do. It belongs to me. That's the conversation that should take place. Well, it's taken me a long time to teach artists to have that conversation. And it's ridiculous that they didn't in the past, but you do need to teach artists to stand up for themselves and to say the things that they have to say. And unfortunately, they didn't, so I taught them. And I would talk to publishers and I would say, like, we ought to get royalties. Well, why should you get royalties? Well, we sell your comic. You do the comic books, we sell your comic books. We're taking the gamble, and they're not like books. You call them comic books. I mean, and maybe you're doing it wrong, but you call them comic books, so they are books. No, they're periodicals. Well, they're books that come out periodically. But, are you saying they were magazines? Or, yes, they're magazines. No, they're not, because 2/3 or more of any magazine is supported by the advertising. You're selling the books based on the work of the artist and the writer. So what? So what? That's good. I like so what. I'll tell you what. Why don't we do it this way? Instead of like attacking you for doing everything wrong, we'll forget that. What if an artist and a writer were to collaborate on a comic book, and let's just say it sold more than you expected it to sell? What do you mean? Well, how many comic books would you expect to sell of a given title? Well, it differs. No.
Let's start with...
Let's pick a number. Any number. That you
let's
want.
start with some number.
Start with 100,000. Okay. In other words, if it hits 100,000, is that good? Oh, yeah, that would be good. 70,000. Well, somewhere around there, 70,000 like that. So anything that is above that is gravy as far as you're concerned. You make a profit. Yeah, well, we make a profit. Well, sure. Is there a number that you would be happy with? Like if it's 70, let's say it's 100. Well, yeah, 100. Oh, what about 150? Yeah. Well, okay. So let's just say you're happy at 150, whatever the number happens to be. Let's just say an artist and a writer work very hard to do a project, and they sell 500,000 copies. Do they deserve a little piece of it? Well, what if they sell 1,000,000 copies? Do they deserve a piece of it? Well, I suppose. But they're not going to do that. Let's just say, pick a number.
Or let's put it on the paper, then on the contract.
Yeah, right. Just put it. Anything above this, they get a little piece of it. Does that make sense to you? Because then you're gambling on a sure thing. They'll never sell that, so you're fine. But if they do, you make this much more money. Don't you want to make money? Well, yes, we want to make money. Well, that makes sense. You know what, buddy? All you had to do is look at the contracts of the book publishers. That's how they do it. Simple as that. Well, you're printing on letterpress presses. What are letterpress presses? Well, it's the oldest style of printing that exists. Your telephone books generally used to get printed that way, but not anymore because they went up in quality. Well, what do you mean? It costs money to print another way. No, it costs more money 20 years ago.
No, actually.
Not now. Not now. Why don't you, we're printing, Continuity is printing on this better paper. It costs us the same amount as your paper. No. Yes. Yes. That's why our printing is better than yours. There's a company called Ronald's in Canada. They're doing our. No, really? They're schmucks. You don't have to be brilliant in a room full of schmucks. Let me tell you.
Sometimes we say something like they are in this way just not to go to war. I mean, that's a way we used to say when someone is pretending to be a little bit stupid, but is really not that way. I mean,
sometimes they're that way.
Oh, that's worse. That's worse. Because there is no way you will be able to.
So anyway, the point is that when I had these fights with the companies, I didn't really have nasty fights. I was never angry.
That's demonstrating by the fact that you are working with.
Right, and everybody's happy, and I smile and I just make friends, and I close the door and so we chat, and then sooner or later.
I know the story of you closing the door with Canning. So I still closing the door. I just started.
Whoa.
What's happening? And what do you think is the situation now? I mean, for creators, right?
We're taking over the world. We're taking over the world. Are you kidding? It's great. I mean, look at Marvel and DC are going to be are going to be assholes. And as soon as DC Comics starts to loosen up, then Marvel has to loosen up because they just copy, right? And now the DC Comics or Warner's made the mistake of putting Jim Lee in charge, who is creative, and he's going to make it better for the artists and the writers. So. And we have people planted. We have spies planted in the companies, and they're going to
But there's a Joe Quesada.
Joe Quesada is going to make sense. Yeah. Oh, a comic book artist that makes sense. Oh, think we should do that, Joe? You know what? If as soon as they start getting too bad, there's other publishers, and some of them make some money.
I'll make you an example. We have in Italy, a big Italian publisher that. Is selling millions of comic books in Italy. When the job get reprinted in other places of the world, he give rights to the artists that made original the work for Italy.
Mm-hmm.
We have now Italian artists working for Marvel, and they have been paid for let's say the US comic book. And when it is reprinted everywhere in the world, they don't have anything from them. So that's bad.
And shit's gonna happen. Look at
because in that case, I mean, they don't have the first cost. That is people who did the issue. They already paid them for the US. Version of the book. So when they translate it and do in Italy, I mean, it's already paid.
Let me just say
they have just to print it.
The problem is that the fight is never done. The fight always goes on. I don't get enthusiastic about winning. I don't get worn out. I don't like, oh, I finally did that, now I can rest. No, I'm not like that. I don't do that, and I try to train people who I know that the fight is never over. The fight just continues, and so you rest, you do other things, and then when it comes in your face, then you wake up, and then you start making little talks and speeches, and you start pushing, and after a while something changes. You can't assume that people are going to change overnight or companies are going to change overnight. You have to the
first concern is always the same. I mean,
so
it's not to pay you more.
Right. So what you do is you work on it. You find ways to work on it. And if you think that it's ever going to be over, you're making a mistake. Don't just keep pushing. It's all right.
And do you think that what happened in the middle of '90s with the Image Comics or Dark Horse with the Legend and Print? I mean, just putting the light on the creators, it helped a little bit. Just the fear, of the measures they had once people was just.
They're fucking terrified, and that's a good condition for them to be in. I like them to be just a little bit frightened.
They work better in, in that condition.
It's amazing how much better they are. That's why I only smile. I don't have to argue with anybody. In fact, I think they're more worried about me when I'm smiling than when I'm not. It's like, hey.
Excluding when you close the door.
I don't even have to close the door anymore. They say, you know what it is. It's a very good situation, and I think that we're better in the comic books than in most things. The economy is not very good otherwise, and we should be writing more and creating more about the economy and learning a little bit more about economics and starting entering it into our comic books, because we can make an effort. We can make an effort on behalf of civilization and countries and economies by making these things apparent to people, by not taking sides or being aggressive, but by talking about the various ways that companies make money. I mean, we don't do that enough. It's time for us in the industry to start fighting different fights. I think we have to do that. I think I'm going to do that.
And also, even if moments are really hard for everyone, and in the United States, but in Italy it's also really worse situation. Entertainment coming from a comic book, it's still a cheap one.
Yeah.
If you think about going to see a film, to the cinema or other things.
We're in a very, very fortunate position, and because of that, we have a responsibility. You might remember in the first of the Batman Odyssey thing, I had this scene with Batman and he had a hydrogen car. He had a hydrogen car, and he drank the water from the exhaust of the hydrogen car.
Yeah.
And it was just an incident. It was just part of the story. But at the same time, people who read the story will turn to their friend and say, "What's this thing about hydrogen power? What's the deal? What's going on here?" Becomes part of the conversation. Even people who are reading comic books have brains, and so they can
sometimes.
Sometimes. And they can talk to other people about it. And they say, "Oh, yeah, I first read about that in the back." And the funny thing is that people will come up to me at a convention, and I'll meet maybe 100 people, but then one guy will come up to me and say, that thing with the hydrogen power, I checked into that. That's that's kind of good. We were talking about that at our company, and suddenly, like, you see, a little shove. That's nice. Good. It's our job.
So, what about your third passion, the one for the science?
I thought you were going to say my kids.
No, I'm thinking about your.
Well,
like, I mean.
Here, I'll show you.
Not your private.
See this?
Oh yes. Yes, in the video.
This is Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. South America.
Mm-hmm.
Above here, North America. With all those islands above Canada. Listen to all those islands pushed together. Okay. Europe. Now we know this part that's Pangea, essentially. Okay. Then this is Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Okay. This is India. Still attached to Asia, but it broke away from Africa. It never was disattached from Asia. It was always part of it. This up here, it's quite a mess up here, but this is Asia. Siberia up here. This is Australia, and this is Antarctica. This is the whole world 200 million years ago. it all fits together. Mathematically, that can't happen. If you know anything about math, if you know anything about odds, if you know anything about...
I read everything you wrote for.
It's not, it's not because I say so.
No, it's really interesting because the point is that everyone was saying something to us, but everyone was just keeping the information without thinking about it.
Oh yeah.
Because if you start thinking,
it's very hard.
The minimum is thinking about. Well, I think we have to give at least the same credit to both opinions, at least, because if you start thinking, there is something strange in what they taught to you.
Let me just say something. Granitic rock, which is what our continents are made of, weighs